Hello, everyone, and welcome to What's New on Everlaw, March 2025 edition. My name is Tori, a user education manager here at Everlaw, and I'm joined by my manager, Michelle. And today I'll be leading today's training, and Michelle will be in the chats answering any questions that you all might have during our training today. Today I'm going to cover the newest features on Everlaw, followed by some helpful updates, and then I'll wrap up with a new training resource that you might find helpful. If there's time after all that, then I'll hand it off to Michelle, and she'll address any questions that came up during the chat that might require a demo or any further explanation. Starting off with the new features, we have had quite a few in this release, so I grouped them together based on who can actually access these particular features. And the first two are actually available to all users, so there's no special permissions required for these ones. The first one is the ability to resize the navigation bar on the left side of the homepage. So now you can simply select and drag the edge of that navigation bar to expand the panel if needed. This can be really great if you have a folder with a long title, and so hopefully it'll be a little bit easier to read. The second feature is going to be really helpful for users who have to apply a lot of redaction stamps. And just like the other one, this is available to all users on a project. And so now you have the ability to apply multiple stamps to a single redaction. So before, what this looks like is that folks had to use custom stamps if they needed to indicate multiple reasons why content was redacted. But now you can just select all of the appropriate options from the available list, and that should save hopefully quite a bit of time for the folks that do these kinds of redactions. So with that kind of context out the way, I'm going to pop over to the platform and I'm going to show you these two things in action. So the first part is we are on the home page right now. And so as you can see on the left-hand side here, there is the navigation bar, which you can use to sort of filter your home page. And now if you hover your mouse over this sort of dividing line between this navigation bar and the main page, you can actually select and drag to extend this panel wider if you need to. The other new feature that you're going to notice is specifically, you'll notice it if you're reviewing a document. So I'm just going to open up my demo binder so that I can open up a document for you all. The specific document doesn't matter, so I'll just open up a random email here. So with my document open, I'm going to select the redaction tool here. You can see that I have quite a few redactions already, but what I'll do now is I'll just select a section of text, let's say this piece of information here, and I now have the option to, when I want to apply a stamp, instead of just choosing one option, I can select as many as are relevant from this list here. Let's say this one as well. And then what'll happen is that you can see that I can see all the stamps here, and they're going to be separated by commas. So every single reason that I have redacted this information will be visible. And so when I produce this to whoever the final recipient is, they'll be able to see all of these reasons for which this information was redacted. And yeah, so that is that. Pretty simple there. And again, those two features are available to all users. So now coming back to my slides, these next three features that I want to tell you about do require some enhanced permissions, but you don't have to be an admin to access them. So the first one is for anyone who has permission to upload transcripts into Storybuilder. So these might be transcripts from your deposition or a hearing or an interview or something like that. You can now specify how many cover pages a transcript has, and you can also indicate what the starting page number is for a particular transcript. And so basically this will just happen after you upload the transcript into Everlaw. Just look for the pencil icon next to the page number. And then from there, you'll be able to update the information as needed. I think this will be especially helpful for any teams that are doing like multi-day depositions, where the page number for the second day's transcript needs to pick up where the first day's transcript left off. This is also helpful for anyone who just receives cover pages on their transcript and they don't want that to count towards their page counts. The next feature is specific to folks who have upload permissions. So you can now edit the default time zone for documents in a native upload. And specifically, this is for documents whose metadata doesn't already indicate a particular time zone. And right now, by default, Everlaw will assign the UTC time zone to those documents, but in your case, something like Eastern Standard Time might be more appropriate for that particular set of documents. And so to make this change, you would just navigate to the Advanced Settings section of the Uploads page. And then from there, you'll be able to select the appropriate time zone from the available list. And this change will persist for not just this upload, but any future native uploads that you perform in this particular case. Now, speaking of uploads, if you or your team use Microsoft Purview, you no longer need to download documents out of Purview to your computer just to upload them into Everlaw. With our newest cloud connector, you'll be able to pull documents or your review sets directly from Purview into Everlaw. You'll just need to log in using your Microsoft Purview account. Okay, so I just covered 3 features, and they do again require some permission to access these. So now I'm going to hop over to the platform and I can show you where all of these features live. So the first feature was in Story Builder specifically, so I'm going to head over there. And I mentioned that you now have the ability for your deposition transcripts to specify the starting page number and things like that. So to get there, I do want to go to the Depositions tab. I'll select any random deposition here, so let's say this one. Once I have my transcript open, what I want to look for is when does my transcript actually start? So as I'm scrolling through here, I notice that there's actually some cover pages here. So I'm seeing who the plaintiff is, the defendant is, some context, I'm seeing an index, table of content, all that kind of stuff. And it's not until this page down here that I finally get to the content where the actual transcript begins. Everything before this is just sort of like context. And so why this is an issue is that if I, for example, wanted to create a citation from this Q&A portion here, it's counting this as starting from page 7, when really this is page 1 of my transcript. And I don't want this to sort of throw me off if I'm quoting this later on as I'm working on like emotion or something like that. And so what I want to do here is that I actually want to click on this little pencil icon up here at the top. And I want to first specify the number of cover pages, and if needed, it's actually not needed in this case, but if I needed to, I could also specify what the starting page number is for this particular transcript. I have 6 cover pages that don't directly contribute to the content of my transcript, and so I don't want these counting towards my page numbering. Again, if I needed to, I could edit the starting page for this particular transcript as well, in case this was like a multi-day deposition. But for now, I think I'm okay. I'll go ahead and click Save. And then what it's going to do is, I've now updated my page numbering, so I can see on those pages that are marked as cover pages, they are in a Roman numeral format. And now for this highlight portion, if I wanted to cite it, it's starting correctly from page 1. So this is page 1 of my transcript, and it's going to show up as page 1 in my citations. So hopefully this will help people quite a bit when they're referencing this bit of testimony or other similar testimony from depositions and interviews that you're doing in the future. Okay, so switching gears, I'm going to head over to the Uploads page. So I'm going to select Data Transfer, Uploads, and then I'm going to select Native Uploads here so I can show you the 2 new features that I was telling you about. When I click Start Upload, the first thing that I'll see actually is this new cloud application. So we now see the new Purview Cloud Connector here. You will need Purview login permissions, or so you do need to be able to log into Microsoft Purview in order to actually access this. So I'm not able to demo that for you today. I am going to select a file from my computer so that I can show you the second new feature related to uploads. And this is the ability to set the default time zone for your documents. So if I expand the language and location tab under advanced settings, I now have the option to set the default time zone. And again, this only applies to documents that didn't already have a particular time zone in their metadata. And I would just be able to select the appropriate option from my list here. And it's a pretty long list, so you should be able to find the ones that you need. All right, so that is that. So now I'm going to come back to my slides again, And for these next two features, these ones are specific to folks who are organization administrators, and they're specifically designed to help you monitor and manage the size of your databases. So I'm going to come over to this next tab here. So the first one is pretty simple. If you are familiar, there is a database sizes tab on the organization administrator page where you can see how large each particular database or case is. And now you have the ability to sort these databases based on their either peak or their current billable size. So this should make it a little bit easier to see which ones are using up the most data and which ones are using up the least data. Related to your database sizes tab, there's also now a new sub-tab, which you can kind of see on the left side of my screen. And this is called data usage notifications. And these are basically just automated alerts that you can set up so that when your database is nearing a preset limit or a preset sort of size limit, you'll be notified immediately. And you can select these either for a particular set of databases, so you can go through a sort of drop-down list and choose a particular database. You can set it up for all databases, or you can use a database field, for example, like if you're using something like client ID number, to indicate which databases you want to be notified about. Okay, so now that we talked about those two features, I'm going to show you where they live on the platform. So coming back to Everlaw, I mentioned that these two features are only available to org admin, which means that you do need to use this diamond O icon in the top of the page to actually access these features. So I'll go ahead and select that here. And what I want to look for is on the left-hand side, there is a database sizes tab. I'll go ahead and select that. And then what I'm seeing here is a list of all of my databases. I can see which ones are suspended, which ones are active, how much data I'm using, etc. But now, if I go to, for example, peak billable size, I have the ability to sort these databases. So for example, I can see which databases don't have any data in them yet. And maybe that's a sign that I should reach out to those teammates to say, when are you going to upload documents into Everlaw? Or vice versa, I can see which ones are using up a lot of data. And so maybe that might be a conversation that we need to have about maybe cutting back on how much data they're putting into Everlaw. And then speaking of data usage, I can also now see that there is this new little sub-tab on the left-hand side here. I can select this, and what I can do is I can create a new notification rule. And this is sort of to let me be notified when specific databases, or maybe all of my databases, are hitting a sort of certain limit as far as how much data they're using. And so, for example, I can just select set by database here. I'll give this sort of rule a name. This is just a test for today, so I'll just call it my test. I can choose which databases I want this to apply to. I could choose all databases, so if this is just across the board, I want to be monitoring where people are, I want to be monitoring how people are using their data. Or I can specify specific databases. So for example, I can say maybe my, maybe this interactive training and this Everlaw training and maybe this deduplication training or something like that. So I can just sort of select whichever trainings feel appropriate here. Once I've selected my databases, I can now specify whether I want to monitor the database size, so in gigabytes, or the billable dollar amount that we are accruing to date. For me, I'll just go by size, maybe because I'm on an annual contract, so I just have a set amount that I can't spend above for the year, or can't use more data than for the year, and so I just want to track that. From here, I can also specify whether I'm tracking in total for all of these databases, or if, if any of them go over a set amount. So for me, I can say altogether, these 3 databases shouldn't be more than 300 gigabytes or something like that. And I can also specify what type of data I'm tracking or what types of databases I'm tracking. So is it just the ones that are active? Is it just the ones that are in active review? Do I also want to track ECA databases, or what about suspended databases? So I can just select whatever feels appropriate here. When I'm ready, I'll go ahead and click create. And then now this rule has been created, and I'll be notified as soon as my team hits this sort of threshold as far as how much data they're using in Everlaw. Okay, So that is, these are the two new features that are specific to organization administrators. Now, I do have two more new features. Like I said, this is a pretty big release, so there are quite a few features that came out. And these last two features are specific to what I would call our API experts. So, API, for folks that are not familiar, is basically a way to use coding to pull data off of Everlaw without needing to log in every single time. It requires a lot of technical know-how and quite a few permissions, so not something that most people generally use. However, if you are one of those folks who are familiar with this, or generally maybe if you want someone on your team to become familiar with this, we do have two new sort of features that are available with the API. The first one is that you can now access the results of a project level search outside of Everlaw. So you can pull those search results outside of Everlaw, and you'll need the sort of ID number for that particular search. But once you have this information and you have your API set up, you'll be able to get document level information like the base or control number for a particular document, the document ID number, and even a URL that you can use to open up that specific document. The other feature is you now have the ability to pull user activity from all levels of the platform. And you can tell what was done by who and in what project. Now, this API functionality is way too technical for me to even pretend to demo for today, but if you are savvy with such things and you want to know more, we'll go ahead and drop a link to our API information page in the chat so you can check that out. Okay, that was a lot, lots of new features. This feature brought not just new releases, but also improved functionality to the platform. So I do want to cover those for you, but I promise this next part will be a little bit faster because there's only two particular updates that I want to share with y'all today. So the first is that in project settings, the production tools have moved, but not too far. So project admin who want to enable productions or manage redactions will need to look for the new subtab under the general section of project settings to make any changes. The functionality itself hasn't changed, so it's just the location has changed just a little bit, and that's just to keep that general tab from getting too cluttered. The other thing that changed is related to entity management. So for those that aren't familiar, entity management is a new feature that was released earlier this year, and it allows database administrators to manage which email addresses are associated with a particular contact, or as we call it, an entity. So with this update, you'll now be able to see the total number of entities and shared email addresses for your dataset. You can also now search across the entities to find specific names or email addresses. And finally, something that all users will notice is that in Data Visualizer, we've replaced email contact names with entities. And that's just to keep it consistent across the platform so that the naming is not changing dramatically. Now, if you would like to know more about entity management, because maybe this is the first time you've heard about it, please check out this helpful resource, which we will drop into the chat. And speaking of resources, the very last thing that I wanted to share with you all is a new set of training resources for you to check out. So in user education, we make all kinds of videos, written guides, standing training opportunities, etc., all designed to help you get comfortable with navigating the Everlaw platform. And one of our newest types of resources are workflow pages. Now, these are step-by-step instructions, images, and even videos designed to help you perform common workflows or tasks that you might need to do in your day-to-day work. So to get to this page from your browser, I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this window here. You would just type in everlaw.com/training. I'll press enter. And then from here, you're going to want to look for the Workflows tab in the navigation bar. In here, you'll see a full list of all of our workflow pages. At the moment, we have 9, but we're always adding new ones. So if you don't see the particular workflow that you need now, let your customer success representative know, and we might add it in the future. Now, just to make it easy for you to get back to this page, I will go ahead and drop this link into the chat. And that way you can bookmark it for later. But just to walk you through a specific workflow. So let's say that you're curious about setting up a project for your reviewers. So I'll go ahead and select this option here. And then if I scroll down, what I can see is that there's a short prerequisite video that the user education team would like you to watch before jumping into this content, a little guidance about who should be looking at this content and how beginner friendly it is. So from here, I can see the specific actions that the user education team thinks that I might want to make. So creating codes is a really common one, but also things like customizing the review space, making sure that I'm sharing these layouts with my reviewers, and then assigning out documents if I need to, if that's how I prefer to distribute documents to my team. And then for each of these resources, or for each of these steps, I can see a specific instructions and then a related resource for me to check out, which is pretty handy. And that's pretty much it for me. So with that said, I'm now going to say thank you. That concludes my sort of presentation piece. I'll now pass it over to Michelle. Were there any questions in the chat that you want to address live or anything that needed to be demoed?